Hi, my name's Adam. Welcome to the channel. Thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about inflation and CPP, two things that are definitely top of mind. If you're in retirement or you're getting close to retirement, you're looking at your retirement plan and trying to figure out how everything works together, there is a direct correlation between what's happening with inflation and taking CPP and the amount you're going to get from CPP, and we're going to break it down in this video. So today I'm going to go through an article that I read on Advisor.ca, and every morning I get different articles sent to me by our community of financial advisors, and Advisor.ca is a great resource. Typically clients don't go to Advisor.ca, it's more for the advisor side, but if you're someone that wants to dig deeper into financial planning and learning about tax and estate planning and stuff like how inflation affects your CPP, these are the types of articles that you'll find on Advisor.ca. We'll link this article below as well, and it really hit home with me because it affects 99.9% of my clients. And so I thought I'd break it down on this video. I'm going to share the article, break it down, give some thoughts on it. So this article is from Leah Koiv, I probably said her last name, but considering inflation when deciding to begin CPP. And this is what it's really about. Now, the first part of the article, I'll let you guys go through on your own. It talks about two inflation measures pertaining to CPP. But what I want to go through is the example down below. So she talks about, as you know, and I've talked about this a lot on this channel, is if you take your CPP early, it's reduced 0.6% every single month. Your CPP amount will be reduced anytime you take it before 65. If you defer it past 65, there's a benefit of 0.7% increase every month. Take it early, it's reduced. You take it later, it's enhanced. But there's other pieces of the equation that you need to consider. And that's what this article really breaks down well. If you take it at 60, it's reduced by 36%. If you take it at 70, you're gonna get 42% more, 0.7% per month times the 5 years. So what she's looked at is wage increase and CPI. Those are the two things we want to look at. And in this article, she talks about, she's assumed a CPI of 2% and wage in growth, which increases that YMPE, which is a factor in calculating your CPP, by 3%. So when you look at the maximum amount of CPP you can collect, it's based on something called YMPE, and that is adjusted based on wage growth. So what she's assumed here, based on statistical and what's been happening in the market, she's put inflation, CPI at 2%, and that wage growth or YMPE growth at 3%. So let's look at the case study she broke down. And I think this is gonna kind of hammer it home for all of you watching this if you're a bit confused so far. So Cynthia's retired and wanted to start her CPP or pension as soon as possible. She started at 60 and started beginning drawing on her CPP January 2020. She did not want to access any of her other assets, which obviously is a bit of a mistake. As a result, she received 64%, again, reduced by 36%, because she took it 5 years early. So she's going to collect $752.53 per month. This amount is indexed and increases each January 1st. Great, perfect. Had she waited to January 1st, 2021, so if she had waited till she was 61 years old, she would have received $857 per month. So 71.2% times the 1203. Again, that 1203 that you see here is different from 1175. It's increased by wage growth, that 3%. So that's a big difference, right? Her amount, 752, is grown by 2%, whereas the YMPE is grown by 3%. And this is what we've seen in the market. And this is why it's important to understand how CPP is calculated and why, again and again, it makes sense to defer your CPP. So she's now going to collect a much larger amount of $857 per month instead of the original 752. Now the 752 was indexed by 1% to 760, so a little bit of index in there. Had she waited the 12 months, her pension would have been 12% larger. So again, it's not 7.2% larger because delaying that one more year it increases 7.2%, which is 0.6% times 12 months. It actually increased 12.76% because there's more factors to the CPP calculation than maybe what you understand. If she began drawing her CPP in January 2022. So if she had waited 2 more years, the monthly amount would have been $982. So it would have gone from $752 up to $982. Massive, massive, massive difference. And again, the difference is it's a percentage of a larger amount. Meanwhile, the pension she began in 2020 would have grown by an additional 2.7%. So again, this is real inflation. This is what actually happened. And this is why this example goes back to 2020. We know what happened in 2020, 21, and what you got index inflation for 2022. These are the actual numbers. This is what would have happened. This is a real life case study. Now, obviously going forward from 2022, we don't know what's going to happen, but she's going to make some assumptions in this case study that I think are very realistic and probably fall for a lot of you. So again, meanwhile, the pension that she began in 2020 would have grown by 2.7%, and now we're sitting at $780.58. So that is what she's collecting. Because she took it at 60, she's collecting $780. Had she waited 2 more years, she'd be collecting $982. A massive, massive difference. So here's a table here. So if we look at this table, and I'll zoom in on it a little bit here for you guys, you can see that 752 number was her starting number. That grew a little bit the first year, a little bit more the second year, and those were actual growth inflation rates that it grew by. And after that, we've assumed 2% growth, and she talks about this here in a second. So this will grow and continue to grow until the day you pass away. Now, if we had deferred until 61, 62, you can see 65. That number at 65, that is a big difference. $1,369 compared to 752, an 82% increase. So when you talk about break-even points, a lot of you say, Adam, but I'm going to take it early. I'm going to start getting my money. The break-even point's down the road. If you just flatline and do a basic calculation, which is what we typically do and what you guys will typically do, that break-even point is a lot later, right? It can be 73, it'll be 82 if you defer it till age 70. But when you start looking at CPI adjustments, YMPE, the actual way CPP is calculated, your break-even point is way faster. Like it could be a few years only. If we look at this, if we defer it all the way till age 70, we're collecting $2,200 versus $900, and again, it's kind of ramped up to $900 from there. What this chart shows is, for subsequent years, she breaks it down here on what she uses, assumes a CPI increase equal to the Bank of Canada's target rate of 2%. The maximum retirement pension, again that YMP, was assumed to increase by 3% based on existing actuarial assumptions. So again, this isn't one person making false assumptions. She's using actuarial numbers to come up with these CPP numbers going forward. As seen in Table 2, the results are dramatic, and they are very dramatic. Delaying the CPP until age 65 would have resulted in a monthly retirement pension that was 82% larger. At age 70, it would have been almost 200% larger. And again, that's larger for the rest of your life. So it's essentially triple the payment that you would have received originally. It's worth noting that we don't know whether the Bank of Canada will be able to tame inflation. They're trying very hard with the interest rates right now, and it's killing my mortgage payments. The higher the inflation rate, the bigger the benefit of waiting. Again, if you're one of these people that are sitting there saying, and this is a lot of you, because I talk to a lot of you, if you're sitting there saying, you're not going to be able to tame inflation, inflation's going to be high for a long time, but I'm going to start my CPP at 60 because I don't trust the government. Those things butt up against each other. So be careful what you say and make sure you do your homework before you come to these assumptions. I think that's very important in all of this. So to illustrate these differences in another way, she says, we can look at the present value of the retirement pension using a life expectancy of 96. Again, actuarial, I know a lot of you say I'll never live till 96. You might. But in this case, using a life expectancy of 96 and a 4% discount rate, the present values are as follows. Age 60, age 65, age 70. As you can see, we go from 239 to 377,000. A massive difference in present value if you break it down that way. It doesn't matter how you cut this, there is a huge advantage to defer it. So as the calculation shows, Cynthia's eagerness disadvantaged her. Assuming Cynthia had sufficient retirement assets to draw on until she began CPP, waiting would have been more beneficial. There are, of course, situations in which waiting to start drawing a retirement pension may not be appropriate. Included here are when someone is receiving CPP survivor benefit, those facing OAS clawback, and those with poor health, which I completely agree with, and we've talked about a lot on this channel. There are reasons to take it early, but that is the minority of you. Again, and a good point here, they mentioned survivor benefit. I've mentioned it before, and I'll continue to mention it here. If you are collecting survivor benefit, you need to reach out to Doug Runchie and get a proper CPP calculation done by Doug to make sure you understand when it makes sense to kind of start your CPP and draw back on that survivor benefit. So very important there. But for those of you that are concerned about inflation, you're concerned about when to take CPP and how everything comes together, this is why it's important to understand some of these numbers, how CPP runs out, get a plan put in place. Like for Cynthia here in this example, if she's able to use some of her other assets to draw on, to live on, while she defers that CPP, it's going to make a lot of sense for her to do that. Most people build up enough assets to do that. And that's where we talk about the RRSP meltdown, drawing down your RSPs, using your other assets to live on, deferring your CPP. And as you can see, she's going to get 3 times as much at 70 versus 60. It's a big difference. So I think it's very important to note that if you can defer your CPP, kind of melt down some of the other assets, not only are you getting a bigger benefit with the CPP, but that's guaranteed government pension for the rest of your life that will continue to grow. So for those of you that don't have a defined benefit pension plan, here's your defined benefit pension plan. And if you want a nice big defined benefit pension plan, defer till 70. So hopefully that gives you a bit more insight on how CPP is calculated and how delaying can actually be a bigger benefit than you might even understand. This is a great article. Again, we'll link it below. Read through the article, read through the numbers. You'll probably have to read it through a few times just to kind of get how everything works together, because there are a lot of moving parts. And this is why when we talk about calculating your CPP, there's no real good way to do it other than to reach out to Doug. If you have some calculations that are more complicated, i.e. survivor benefit, child ruin years, CPP disability, these things come into play and they affect the amount of CPP you're going to get. And I highly recommend get a proper calculation done. Again, we'll link Doug's website below. Reach out to Doug, get a calculation done, very reasonably cost. Thank you for joining us in this video. Hopefully this kind of opened up your eyes to inflation and Canadian pension plan, CPP, and when to take it. If it didn't, go read this article, because it should kind of shake you and help make your decision on why you should defer it, unless again you fall under one of those 3 criteria to take it early. So thank you for joining us. We'll see you in the next one.